This is unacceptable behavior, and I will not tolerate it in my classroom.
You have no right to accuse me.
The chalk dust hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Patricia Morrison stood frozen at the blackboard, her expensive heels clicking silent against the linoleum as the woman in the janitor's uniform stepped forward. The classroom went dead quiet. The equations covering the board, differential calculus so complex it made graduate students weep, seemed to mock everyone in that room. But what happened in the next 47 seconds would shatter every assumption, expose years of cruelty, and turn one woman's humiliation into a moment that would be talked about for decades. Because sometimes the person you've been looking down on is actually looking down at you from heights you'll never reach.
Her name was Dorothy Green, and every morning at 5:47 a.m. she pushed her cleaning cart through the marble hallways of Whitmore Preparatory Academy with the kind of precision that comes from ritual. The squeak of the third wheel had become her metronome, the rhythm that marked her invisible existence in a world designed to overlook her. Whitmore Prep wasn't just a school. It was an institution, a cathedral of privilege where tuition cost more than most families earned in a year. The building itself was a testament to old money, oak-paneled walls lined with portraits of distinguished alumni, crystal chandeliers that threw rainbow prisms across polished floors, and classrooms equipped with technology that most public schools could only dream about. Dorothy knew every inch of this place. She knew which water fountain on the third floor leaked, which classroom always had gum under the desks, and which teachers left their coffee cups growing mold over long weekends. She'd worked here for 11 years, and in all that time, most people had never bothered to learn her name. To them, she was just the janitor, a moving fixture as permanent and unnoticed as the furniture. But Dorothy had secrets that these halls would never whisper. In her small apartment 15 blocks away, tucked in a neighborhood where sirens sang lullabies, Dorothy had a different life. Her walls were lined with books, mathematics texts with broken spines and coffee-stained pages, journals filled with elegant equations written in her precise handwriting, printouts of research papers she'd downloaded from library computers. On her desk sat 3 rejection letters from MIT, 2 from Princeton, 1 from Stanford. All polite, all apologetic, all explaining that despite her impressive GRE scores and remarkable application, there simply wasn't funding available for someone in her circumstances, someone who was 42, someone who'd spent the last 20 years working night shifts and raising a daughter alone, someone whose skin color seemed to matter more than her mind. Mathematics had been Dorothy's first love and her constant companion. While other kids played outside, young Dorothy had filled notebooks with patterns, sequences, and proofs. She'd earned a full scholarship to State College, aced every course, graduated summa cum laude with a degree in mathematics. The future had sparkled with possibility. Then life happened. An unexpected pregnancy, a partner who disappeared, a mother diagnosed with cancer, student loans that came due whether life was fair or not. The teaching position she'd applied for went to others, people with the right connections, the right backgrounds, the right look. The research opportunities dried up, the doors closed one by one, until the only door left open was the service entrance at Whitmore Prep. But Dorothy never stopped loving mathematics. She solved problems while she cleaned, worked through proofs while she mopped, kept her mind sharp even as the world tried to dull her edges. The students who rushed past her in the hallways, their backpacks heavy with homework they complained about, had no idea that the woman emptying their trash cans could solve their calculus problems in her sleep. The irony wasn't lost on her. She cleaned the rooms where privileged children learned lessons she'd already mastered, where teachers earning 6 figures taught concepts she understood intimately. Sometimes, late at night, when the school was empty, Dorothy would stand in front of the advanced mathematics classrooms and read what was written on the boards. She'd find mistakes. Small ones, usually. A sign error here, an incorrect integration there. She never corrected them. That wasn't her place. Dr. Patricia Morrison arrived at Whitmore Prep 3 years ago with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for celebrities. Harvard-educated, published author, guest speaker at education conferences. She taught AP Calculus and Advanced Mathematics, and she wore her credentials like armor. Her classroom was her kingdom, and she ruled it with an iron fist wrapped in designer labels. Patricia had a way of looking at people, a particular tilt of her head, a slight narrowing of her eyes that communicated her assessment of their worth. And her assessment of Dorothy Green, on the few occasions she'd actually acknowledged her existence, had been abundantly clear. "Make sure you don't touch my desk," Patricia had said once, her voice dripping with condescension. "Some of these papers are quite complex. I wouldn't want anything disturbed." Dorothy had simply nodded, emptied the trash, and left. But she'd seen the papers on that desk. Linear algebra homework, undergraduate level. She could have graded them with her eyes closed. The tension between them was subtle but steady, like a low-frequency hum that only certain people could hear. Patricia represented everything the world had offered Dorothy and then snatched away. Respect, recognition, the assumption of intelligence. And Dorothy represented everything Patricia feared acknowledging, that merit and opportunity don't always overlap, that the hierarchy they all lived within was arbitrary and cruel. On this particular Tuesday morning, Dorothy was running behind schedule. Her daughter had been sick, the bus had been late, and her routine was thrown off by 30 minutes. She pushed her cart faster than usual, trying to make up time, knowing that any deviation from invisibility could be dangerous. She didn't know that today her invisibility was about to shatter. She didn't know that Dr. Patricia Morrison was having the worst day of her career, that a particularly arrogant student had challenged her solution to a problem in front of the entire class, that Patricia's ego was bruised and hungry for someone weaker to consume. She didn't know that the police officer doing his routine patrol of the building would be in the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. All Dorothy knew was that when she pushed her cart past room 304, something felt different. The air seemed charged, the way it does before a storm, and she should have trusted that instinct. She should have kept walking. But the trash in room 304 needed emptying, and Dorothy Green had never been the type to leave a job half done.
The classroom was still full when Dorothy entered, which was unusual. Normally, by this time, the students had scattered to their next period. But today they lingered, clustered in small groups, their voices low and excited in that way that meant drama was unfolding. Dr. Patricia Morrison stood at the front of the room, her face flushed, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled. The blackboard behind her was covered, absolutely covered, in equations. Differential equations, partial derivatives, matrix transformations. It looked like organized chaos, a mathematical symphony that would intimidate anyone without advanced training. Dorothy moved quietly toward the trash can in the corner, trying to be invisible as always. But she couldn't help but glance at the board. Her mathematician's eye caught it immediately. There was an error in the third line, a sign mistake that had cascaded through the entire problem, leading to an incorrect solution. It was subtle, the kind of mistake that happened when you were working fast, trying to prove something to someone, your pride overriding your precision. "Can I help you?" Patricia's voice sliced through the air, sharp as a scalpel. "We're in the middle of something important here." Dorothy looked up, meeting Patricia's gaze for just a moment before lowering her eyes. "Just the trash, ma'am. I'll be quick." "Well, hurry up. Some of us are engaged in actual intellectual work." A few students snickered. Dorothy felt the familiar heat of humiliation creep up her neck, but she kept her face neutral, kept moving. This wasn't new. This was just Tuesday.
but then Patricia's voice came again, louder this time, performative. "You know what? Actually, wait." Dorothy froze, her hand on the trash can. "I have an idea." Patricia's smile was sharp, predatory. "We've been struggling with this problem all period. The students are getting frustrated. Maybe you can help us." The room went quiet. Every student turned to look at Dorothy. She could feel their eyes on her, could sense the trap closing even before she understood its full shape. "Ma'am, I need to finish my— It'll just take a second." Patricia walked toward her, heels clicking with purpose. "You clean these classrooms every day. Surely some of this mathematics has rubbed off on you. Basic problem-solving skills, right?" Dorothy's jaw tightened. She knew what this was. This was sport. This was a woman with power entertaining herself by humiliating someone without it. "I really should. Are you refusing to participate in an educational exercise? Because I'm simply asking for a moment of your time. Surely you can spare that for the students' benefit." Officer Daniels, the school's resource officer, appeared in the doorway. He'd been walking by, heard the unusual exchange, stopped to investigate. His presence changed the energy in the room immediately, made everything feel heavier, more official, more dangerous. "Everything okay here, Dr. Morrison?" he asked, his hand resting casually near his belt. "Oh, perfectly fine," Patricia said, her smile growing wider. "I was just asking our custodial staff for some help with a problem, but she seems reluctant." The implication hung in the air like poison gas. The officer's eyes moved to Dorothy, and she recognized the look, the subtle shift from neutral to suspicious, the way his posture changed ever so slightly. She'd seen it 1,000 times before, in stores, on streets, in places where her presence needed justifying. "Ma'am, if the teacher is asking you something, you should probably cooperate," Officer Daniels said, his voice firm but not yet aggressive. Dorothy's hands tightened on the handle of her cleaning cart. She was trapped, pinned between authority and humiliation, with an audience of privileged teenagers who would remember this moment as entertainment. "What's the problem?" Dorothy asked quietly, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. Patricia's smile turned triumphant. She gestured toward the blackboard like a game show host revealing a prize. "This. Solve this. Show us what you've got." The students leaned forward in their seats. Some pulled out their phones, sensing something shareable, something that would get likes and retweets. She could see them framing their shots, documenting her humiliation before it had even fully unfolded. She looked at the board again. The equations were complex, yes, the kind of problem that would challenge any undergraduate mathematics student, that would stump most people with advanced degrees. The error she'd spotted earlier glowed in her mind like a neon sign. She could solve it in her head, could map the corrections needed, could rewrite the entire proof in a cleaner, more elegant way. But should she? There was safety in invisibility. There was survival in playing the role they'd assigned her. If she solved this problem, she wouldn't just be showing up Patricia Morrison, she'd be stepping outside of every box society had built to contain her. She'd be making herself visible, and visibility for someone like her was often dangerous. "I'm not a mathematician, ma'am. This is beyond—" "Oh, come now. Just try. Give it your best shot." Patricia's voice was dripping with false encouragement. "I mean, how hard can it be? These are just numbers and symbols, right? Surely someone who cleans for a living can understand basic arithmetic." Basic arithmetic. The phrase hit Dorothy like a slap. This woman, who'd published one mediocre paper on curriculum design, who taught undergraduate-level calculus to high school students and called herself an intellectual, was mocking her with the phrase basic arithmetic. The rage that Dorothy had been swallowing for 11 years started to rise in her throat. "Dr. Morrison?" one student said hesitantly, a girl named Emma, who Dorothy knew was kind, who always said thank you when Dorothy emptied her trash. "Maybe we should just—" "I'm teaching a lesson here, Emma, a very important lesson about effort and attempting things even when they're above your level." Patricia kept her eyes locked on Dorothy. So are you going to try, or are you going to admit that some people are simply meant for intellectual pursuits and others are meant for, well, service? Officer Daniels shifted uncomfortably, sensing that this had crossed some line he couldn't quite identify, but felt nonetheless. Ma'am, maybe we should— I'm not done, Patricia snapped, her composure cracking slightly. This is my classroom. I'm conducting a pedagogical exercise. Unless there's a security issue here, Officer Daniels. The officer looked at Dorothy, his face unreadable. Ma'am, are you going to cooperate? And there it was, the word that transformed a teacher's cruelty into a police matter. Cooperation. The word that turned humiliation into potential criminalization, that made Dorothy's body language, her reluctance, her very existence, into something suspicious, something that might need force to correct. Dorothy's daughter flashed through her mind. Janelle, 17, brilliant, about to apply to colleges. Janelle, who'd grown up watching her mother work herself to exhaustion, who'd inherited Dorothy's love of mathematics and her hunger for more. Janelle, who'd asked just last week, Mom, why didn't you ever become a teacher? Why do you clean schools instead of running them? Dorothy never told her daughter the full truth about the doors that had closed, the opportunities that evaporated, the ways the world had systematically dismantled her dreams while smiling politely. She wanted to protect Janelle from that knowledge, to let her believe that hard work and intelligence were enough. But maybe it was time for a different lesson. Dorothy took a breath, put down her cleaning supplies, and walked toward the blackboard. The room held its collective breath. Patricia's smile widened, anticipating the moment that this woman would stare at the equations in confused defeat, proving everything Patricia believed about hierarchies and natural orders and who belonged where. Dorothy picked up a piece of chalk. She stared at the board for 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. The students watched. The officer watched. Patricia watched, her arms crossed, her expression smug. And then Dorothy began to write. Her handwriting was precise, elegant. She didn't hesitate, didn't pause to think. Her hand moved with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this for decades, who understood these concepts so intimately that explaining them was like breathing. She circled Patricia's error in the third line, wrote the correction, showed the proof that the original approach was flawed, rewrote the entire solution using a more efficient method that saved 3 steps and arrived at a cleaner answer, added a footnote explaining an alternative approach using matrix theory that would yield the same result. The classroom was absolutely silent, except for the scratch of chalk on board. 2 minutes later, Dorothy stepped back. The board now showed not just the correct solution, but multiple solutions, proofs of why each approach worked, and annotations that demonstrated a depth of understanding that made Patricia's original attempt look like a child's crayon drawing next to a Rembrandt. Dorothy set down the chalk carefully and turned to face Patricia Morrison. The teacher's face had gone from smug to confused to pale in the span of those 2 minutes. Her mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. She looked like a woman watching her entire worldview collapse in real time. You made a sign error in line 3, Dorothy said quietly, her voice steady and professional. It carried through to your final solution, which is why you got a negative eigenvalue when the problem clearly required a positive one. The method itself was sound, just executed imprecisely. It happens. Mathematics—
Where did you— Patricia's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again. How did you— How did I what? Dorothy asked, and for the first time in 11 years she let the full weight of her intelligence show in her eyes. How did I solve a differential equations problem? How did I identify your error? How did I demonstrate 3 different solution methodologies off the top of my head? The classroom felt electric, charged with an energy that made everyone hyper-aware of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just mathematics. This was revelation. This was the moment when every assumption shattered, when the invisible became undeniable, when the hierarchy everyone had accepted without question revealed itself as the lie it had always been. Patricia's face flushed red, then white. Her hands were shaking. You're a janitor. You can't just... I can't just what? Be good at mathematics? Understand concepts that took you until graduate school to barely grasp? Dorothy's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath now. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in mathematics. I scored in the 99th percentile on my GRE. I've spent 20 years studying advanced mathematics on my own time, reading journals, working through problems, keeping my mind sharp while the world tried to convince me that this uniform defined my intelligence. A phone camera was definitely recording now. Multiple phones, actually. This was going to be on social media within the hour. "That's impossible," Patricia whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't. The evidence was right there on the blackboard, undeniable and elegant. "What's impossible, Dr. Morrison?" Dorothy took a step closer, and Patricia actually took a step back. "That someone who cleans your floors might be smarter than you. That the woman you've been dismissing for 3 years might have more mathematical talent in her little finger than you've accumulated in your entire career. That the world you've been living in, where people like me stay in our place and people like you get to feel superior, is built on nothing but prejudice and privilege." Officer Daniels moved slightly, a reflexive gesture toward control. "Ma'am, you need to call—" "Don't!" Dorothy spun to face him, and the force of her gaze stopped him mid-sentence. "Don't tell me to calm down. Don't put your hand near your weapon. Don't do anything except stand there and witness what you've been part of." The officer's face showed confusion, a flicker of shame, uncertainty about what his role was supposed to be in this moment that had spiraled far beyond a simple request for cooperation. Dorothy turned back to Patricia. "You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted to parade me in front of your students as an example of what intellectual failure looks like. You wanted to use my body, my job, my existence as a prop in your little lesson about hierarchies and natural order. Well, congratulations, Dr. Morrison. You did teach a lesson today. Not the one you intended." I wasn't trying to—" "Yes, you were." Dorothy's voice was quiet but absolute. "And you've been doing it for years. Not just to me, I've watched you. I've seen how you treat the cafeteria workers, the maintenance staff, anyone you consider beneath you. I've heard you make jokes about the help when you thought no one important was listening. I've seen you pull your purse closer when certain students walk by. I've watched you systematically teach these children that intelligence looks a certain way, comes from a certain background, wears a certain color skin." Emma was crying silently in the back row. Several other students looked stricken, recognition dawning on their faces. "Every day," Dorothy continued, her voice growing stronger, "I've cleaned your classroom. I've erased your boards, emptied your trash, wiped down your precious desk. And every day, I've been invisible to you. Not because I'm unremarkable, not because I have nothing to offer, but because you need people like me to be invisible. You need us to be small, to stay in our boxes, to confirm your worldview that the way things are is the way they should be." Patricia's eyes were brimming with tears now, but Dorothy felt no satisfaction in her distress. There was no victory here, just truth, raw and painful. "Do you know what it's like," Dorothy asked, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "to be brilliant and invisible? To understand things that the people teaching them barely comprehend? To solve problems in your head while you're mopping floors? To read journals on your phone during lunch breaks? To keep your mind alive in the small spaces between exhaustion and survival?
Do you know what it costs to maintain your dignity when the world tells you every single day that you don't deserve any? The silence that followed was absolute. Officer Daniels had removed his hand from his belt, was standing with his arms at his sides, looking like he wanted to disappear. The students sat frozen, their phones still recording, capturing something they would remember for the rest of their lives. "I don't want your apology," Dorothy said softly, "because you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry your students saw you get intellectually dismantled by the janitor. You're sorry your authority just evaporated in front of your carefully curated audience. But you're not sorry for the years of small cruelties, the daily degradations, the systematic diminishment of everyone you considered lesser." Dorothy picked up her cleaning supplies, her hands perfectly steady now. "I'm going to finish my rounds. I'm going to do my job because I'm professional and I take pride in my work, regardless of what that work is. But I want you to know something, Dr. Morrison. Every time you see me in these hallways from now on, every time I empty your trash or clean your blackboard, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that I was always here. I was always brilliant. I was always worthy of respect. You just couldn't see it." She walked toward the door, then paused, looking back at the room full of stunned faces. "And to the students recording this, post it, share it, let the world see, because stories like this need to be told. Not to shame Dr. Morrison specifically, but to shame the system that creates 1,000 Dr. Morrisons, that builds entire institutions on the backs of invisible people, that confuses credentials with intelligence and privilege with merit." Dorothy looked at Emma, the kind girl in the back row. "You asked me once what I studied in college. I told you nothing important. I want you to know I lied. I studied everything important. And I'm still studying. I'm still learning. I'm still brilliant. I just don't have the right costume to make people see it." She walked out of room 304, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like the entire building was holding its breath.
The video went viral within 3 hours. "Janitor solves advanced math problem in under 2 minutes," read one headline. "Teacher gets owned by the woman she tried to humiliate," said another. Within 24 hours, Dorothy Green's face was everywhere, on social media, on news sites, in think pieces about education and inequality, and the invisible intelligence that society systematically overlooks. Whitmore Prep's administration went into crisis mode. The principal called emergency meetings. The school board convened. There were discussions about context and misunderstandings and isolated incidents. Dr. Patricia Morrison was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, not for racism, they were careful to note, but for creating a disruptive learning environment. The carefully worded statements didn't matter. The internet had already rendered its verdict. But the real story wasn't happening in boardrooms or on Twitter. It was happening in Dorothy's apartment, where she sat with her daughter Janelle, watching the video play on her laptop screen for the dozenth time. "Mom," Janelle whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You never told me." "I didn't want you to be angry," Dorothy said softly. "I didn't want you to know how hard I've had to fight just to keep my mind alive. I wanted you to believe the world was fairer than it is." "But you're brilliant. You're amazing. Why are you cleaning schools when you could be—" "When I could be what?" Dorothy asked gently. "Teaching? I tried. Research? I applied. The doors closed, baby. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because I wasn't what they were looking for. Wrong age, wrong situation, a lot of things. Janelle's face hardened with understanding. Wrong color. Dorothy didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. The offers started coming in almost immediately. Universities reached out, offering full scholarships for graduate programs. Tech companies offered jobs. Education nonprofits wanted her to speak at conferences. Everyone who'd overlooked her for 20 years suddenly wanted a piece of Dorothy Green's story. But Dorothy was cautious. She'd learned that visibility could be just as dangerous as invisibility, that being held up as an exceptional example could reinforce the same systems that had marginalized her in the first place. "Look at this amazing janitor who's also brilliant," the headlines screamed, as if those two things were contradictory, as if someone who cleaned for a living couldn't possibly be intellectually gifted unless there were some kind of miraculous exception. Dorothy understood what they were really saying. Look how remarkable this one person is. That's why she's different from all the other janitors, all the other service workers, all the other invisible people. She's special. The rest are exactly where they belong. But that wasn't the lesson Dorothy wanted to teach. 3 weeks after the incident, Dorothy stood in front of a community college mathematics class, not as a student, but as a guest lecturer. The class was full of people like her, older students, working adults, people who'd had to take roundabout routes to education, people whose intelligence had been dismissed or overlooked because it didn't fit the expected package. "I'm not here as inspiration," Dorothy told them. "I'm not here to be your example of overcoming adversity or proof that the system works if you just try hard enough, because that's bullshit. The system is broken. It was designed to keep people like us out, to make us prove ourselves 1,000 times over while others get through on privilege and mediocrity." The students, black, brown, white, young, old, all of them carrying stories of closed doors and second chances, listened with hungry attention. "But here's what I want you to know," Dorothy continued. "Your intelligence doesn't need validation from institutions that were built to exclude you. Your worth isn't determined by who sees it or acknowledges it. I was brilliant when I was mopping floors. I was brilliant when I was emptying trash cans. I was brilliant every single day, whether anyone recognized it or not. And so are you." A woman in the back row raised her hand. "But how do you keep going? How do you stay sharp when the world keeps telling you you're not good enough?" Dorothy smiled. "You do mathematics because you love it. You read because you're curious. You learn because your mind demands it. Not for degrees or careers or recognition, for you. Because you deserve to feed your own intelligence, regardless of what doors open or close." The class was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping, and Dorothy stood there, feeling something she hadn't felt in 20 years. Not vindication or victory, but simple recognition. The acknowledgement that she'd always deserved. Dr. Patricia Morrison resigned from Whitmore Prep 2 months later. She released a statement about personal growth and learning from mistakes, but she never directly apologized to Dorothy. Some things, Dorothy supposed, were too ego-shattering to face head-on. Emma, the kind student from room 304, came to find Dorothy before the end of the semester. "I'm changing my major," she said. "I was going to study business because that's what my parents wanted. But after what I saw, I want to study education. I want to teach math, and I want to remember what you showed us." "What did I show you?" Dorothy asked. "You said intelligence looks like all kinds of things, that assumptions are dangerous, that the people we overlook might be the most valuable people in the room." Dorothy hugged her, this privileged girl who'd learned something no textbook could teach. Months passed. Dorothy eventually accepted a position as a mathematics instructor at the community college, teaching night classes for students like her, people who'd taken unconventional paths, who were brilliant but overlooked, who needed someone to see them. She still cleaned part-time at Whitmore Prep because, as she explained to confused reporters, "I like the work, I like the routine, and I refuse to treat any honest work as beneath me." But the real change was quieter, harder to quantify. It was in the way maintenance workers started getting acknowledged in Whitmore's hallways. It was in the new diversity initiatives the school quietly implemented. It was in the students who started actually seeing the people who kept their school running, who said hello and thank you, and treated service workers like the essential humans they were. One evening, Dorothy stood in room 304 after everyone had left, looking at the blackboard. Someone had written, "Intelligence has no uniform. Respect has no hierarchy. Dorothy Green." She didn't erase it. Instead, she added underneath in her elegant handwriting, "And dignity needs no permission."